Hello everyone and welcome to the next lesson for the SNAP course. So today we'll be finishing up the R project that we just started last class. It might seem like we only did the R project for a little while, but today most of the class is just going to be the R project. So you'll have enough time to do something. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so last time we had a very interesting challenge, which was to essentially draw a bunch of lines going from point to point that you enter in a list. So you had to look at it outside of class, but let's take a look at this in class too because it's pretty important. In fact, this will really help you save a lot of time when you're making your actual project because we don't want to have to keep writing this out again and again and again. Okay, so let's go to the next part. We're going to be using a for loop like last time, and if you remember, it's called iterating. Okay, so let's break down the code. So if we want to draw a bunch of lines between these points, 50-50, 100-100, 150-50, and then 50-50, what we have to do is we have to draw lines between each of those pairs of points. So if we think about this, first we're going to draw a line from 50-50 to 100-100. Then we're going to draw a line from 100-100 to 150-50. Finally, we're going to draw a line from 150-50 to 50-50. So how can we think about this in a more code or programming like style? Well, we can start by almost using words. So first, we could say step 1, draw a line from 50-50 to 100-100. Step 2, draw a line from 100-100 to 150-50. And step 3, draw a line from 150-50 to 50-50. Okay, so we have 3 steps here. So notice that just like last time when we had that robot code, we're repeating a lot of stuff because we're just saying draw a line from blah to blah, draw a line from blah to blah. So that's repeated. And what we're doing is we're actually iterating. We're almost using like a for loop because remember last time how we had to do the same thing a bunch of times, and except it was for the first student, then the second student, then the third student. But this time what we're doing is we're doing the same thing a bunch of times, but for the first line, for the second line, for the third line, etc. And notice that the number of lines that we're going to need is just, well, we have a bunch of points there. We have 4 points there because 50-50, 100-100, 150-50, and then 50-50. The number of lines that we're going to need to draw is 1 less than that because 4 points, if we're going from point to point, there's only 3 lines in between them. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to always go from the first point to the next point and so on. So let's take a look at step 1. So we have go to the first point. So that's just the first item in the list for the x value and then the second item in the list for the y value. Equivalently, this is just the same thing as go to 50-50 in our list that we have on the right. Then we're going to want to put the pen down so that we can actually draw. And then we actually have to draw the lines. But drawing the lines is really simple. We're just going to have to need to go to each of the next points. So to do this, we're going to need a for loop. But before we can look at the for loop, because that's kind of complicated, let's take a look at A, B, and C. So first, let's start with I equals 2, because we're trying to go to the second point. So how can we go to the second point, which is 100-100? Well, we're going to need to go to which index in the list. Notice that if we want to go to the second point, we have to go to the third and the fourth items in the list, because the third and the fourth are 100-100. So to do that, we're going to multiply 2 times our value of I and then subtract 1 to get the first, and then 2 times the value of I to get the second. How can you see this? It's because each of the way we're taking in data is we're taking it in 2 at a time. We're not taking it in 1 at a time. So in order to take it in 2 at a time, we're going to first take in 2 times the value of I minus 1 and then the 2 times the I. That way we don't actually repeat any data. Okay, so after we do that, go to item 2 times I minus 1 for x and I times 2 for y is going to just evaluate to item 2 times 2 minus 1 and item 2 times 2, which is just go to item 3 of list and item 4 of list for the x and y. But these are just 100 and 100, exactly what we wanted. And the same stuff works for I equals 3 and I equals 4. So notice that what we want to do now is we want to actually be able to do this for a bunch of points. Here we had just 4 points, so it was okay. But what if we want to do it for a bunch of points? Well, that's simple. All we have to do is use a for loop. We go for I equals 2 to 4, because notice that our values of I are just 2, 3, and 4. So we just go for I equals 2 to 4, and then we run go to x item 2 times I minus 1 of list and y item 2 times I of list. So if we do that, we're going to each of those next points. So first we'll go to the first point, then put the pen down, go to the second point, go to the third point, go to the fourth point, and then put the pen up. Okay, so now let's put it all together. So if we want to actually use this, then this is exactly the same thing. On the right, this is exactly the same thing as the previous slide. This slide, with all of this complicated code on the left, if we evaluate it, if we keep pushing to the right and getting less and less abstract and inputting the actual values from our list, we just get this really simple piece of code. So you might be like, why did we just code this huge function if we could just write these 6 or 7 or 8 lines? Well, the reason is, if we want to actually use this without the same numbers, like 50, 50, 100, 100, 150, 50, 50, 50, that was this problem. But what if we want to use different numbers? Well, then we're going to have to write this entire thing again. Instead, we could just use this function that we created. So if we look at this function, this is the exact same thing, except instead of having 2 to 4, it just has the length of the list divided by 2. The reason it's divided by 2 is because, again, remember that we're actually reading in the data 2 at a time. So we're going to keep taking it in 2 at a time. So we're only going to go to half of the length of the list. Okay, so basically, if we code this function, draw fig, now we can just use those 2 lines of code, clear and then draw fig, 50, 50, 100, 100, 150, 50, 50, 50. And our output is that exact triangle that we get when we draw this. So instead of having to rewrite this 6 lines a gazillion times to draw a bunch of triangles, we could just use this draw fig function that we have. And each of those draw fig functions is only 1 line, whereas this is 7 lines of code. So using our own function makes our program a lot more flexible, and it makes it shorter. Okay, so if you still didn't get the function completely, I'd recommend trying to just code this exact same function yourself. So first put this function into code, and then see what it does. Try changing up the values and keep doing stuff like that, and you'll get a better understanding of it. Keep looking at this slide again, and if you try it a lot on your own, you'll be able to get a better and better understanding of it. Just play with the numbers and also try messing with the code. Try to break it and then see why it broke. The more you play around with it, the better you'll get an understanding of it. Okay, so now let's do an experiment. So make a function that draws a triangle from 3 points as the arguments. So notice that that's basically what this did, except it's a little bit simpler. So try this, making a function. You won't need a for loop for this, but you can do this without a for loop. So with extra time, make another rectangle function. Or if you have extra time, rather than make a rectangle function, just make a quadrilateral function. So what a quadrilateral is, if you don't know, is it's just a four-sided figure. So anything that has four sides is a quadrilateral. So make something that draws a quadrilateral. Okay, so assuming you've tried that, and you probably should try that because it's going to be really helpful if you have those two functions for this art project. If you have those functions, then this art project will be really simple. Okay, so your goal is going to be to recreate this image. This image we just took off the web. It's just some clip art. So what you're going to have to try to do is you're going to try to take this image and draw it in Snap. And that looks like it's really hard using the pen tools. And it would take a bunch of code if you didn't have those functions. But with those functions, it won't be a problem. You'll need to use the drawFig function if you have it, or if you don't have the drawFig function, the trapezoid, or not the trapezoid, but the quadrilateral function is really useful. The reason the quadrilateral function is useful is because if you notice, this road actually is a trapezoid, the shape of the road. So yeah, that's enough of like an explanation. You'll probably need the either the drawFig function or your quadrilateral function, as well as the fill, or that fill function, which allows you to actually fill in the colors. Also, you don't need to do the curvy parts because drawing the curvy parts can get a lot more complicated because you might actually need to figure out how that curvy part is actually shaped. And you don't have to draw the mountain ranges, but you can draw them if you want to. Well, in any case, it's definitely true that this image is hard to draw, so try to do as much of the image as you can. Even if you can just get the road, or even if you can just get one part of the road, that should be a great accomplishment. But if you even get up to this image on the top right, that is really cool. Okay, so that's for you to try. And also, notice that this is an art project. So if you want to ever save this image or this work of art that you've created, click on the stage and right-click, and you can actually save a screenshot or an image of it. Okay, so for anyone who really wants that image that is on the upper right, we can actually give you the code so that you can like keep it or experiment with it. So on the right, you can actually see the code that was used to make that image. So it basically draws a bunch of overlapping trapezoids. So notice also how we use the drawFig function. If we actually had to write out the code for the drawFig function every single time, you can imagine how long this code will be. Also, if you notice, this code is actually really repetitive. So do you think that you could make a function that could reduce the number of lines that you need to do this same amount of code? That's for you to try. Okay, that's basically it for today. So we hope you enjoyed the art project, and we hope you can replicate as much of that clip art image as you can. So that's it for today. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next lesson where we'll be starting a new project.